Welcome to D, your go-to podcast for candid conversations. Dive deep with us into the heart of life's challenges, business hurdles, and the journey to better ourselves. Join us in exploring the art of living intentionally, finding balance, and enhancing not just your life, but your business and leadership skills. It's time to grow.
Delighted to be back with Eric Swick, all the way from Colorado. I mean, is that the right zip code, Eric?
Yeah, that's the right place.
Yeah. Now, it's very interesting, isn't it? Since we recorded the last episode, you and I have had a few interesting experiences together, one of which was visiting you after a day in ER.
Yes, yes, that was an interesting day. I'm just glad you came out of it good on the other side.
For anybody listening, Eric and I experienced one of those moments at the end of the day that day, which, if I can paint the picture, we're in Colorado. For some reason, I'd lost my eyesight during the day. Being in ER, I had every test under the sun done. A very expensive American health bill, right? And then all of a sudden, I was declared functioning and normal and healthy, and I was released, and my sight was back. And if you ask yourself, what do you do in a situation like that, Eric? Do you go back to your hotel? Do you go back to where you're staying? Do you go and put your feet up? No. We went to see the Swicks.
You came to the house and you had a cup of tea.
That's exactly what we did, didn't we? And we discovered that you have a dog the same as us, a Monty dog.
Yeah, they could be twins. They could be brothers.
They could absolutely be relatives. And we got two fixes. We got great company, great conversation, and a pet fix all in one go. So wasn't that an eventful day? But since then, we've rewritten Leadership and Leadershit, and it's a complete rewrite. What do you think, my friend? Oh, by the way, before you answer, what are you doing these days? What's happened since?
First of all, the best thing I could tell people is I'm enjoying life. Not having to run a business full time with staff has freed me up to do the things that I really enjoy in life. And I think that's an important thing. You hear a lot of the young people, my children, it's all about work balance with your personal life. And I've taken that to an extreme, but it's been great. It's made me more aware of things. And, when I do spend time with clients, I feel that I'm the best I can be.
Fantastic. Well, that's great, isn't it? And I know you've worked particularly hard at getting that balance right. So, and I think if you think about leadership in general, that is about being balanced. So, what did you think of the new way the book came out?
Well, first of all, I've got to say, I think this is such an improvement. It doesn't mean the original book was bad. It's just there's so much more content. It's so much user-friendly. I love all the different techniques that are shared. You're sharing a lot of the RLC information that is in this. It's just amazing that much information is in this little book. It's packed. It's just packed. And so I love that. The last time when this book was published, you asked for my feedback on authentic or fake. And I kind of went back over that chapter and I was thinking about, the chapter, the title of the book is Leadership or Leadershit. And, it implies that, there's a right way and there's a wrong way. And I agree with that. But I feel like even myself personally, there's been an evolution that has taken time. And I've always been, for most of my career, in a leadership role. Probably in my early 20s, I was put into a position of leadership, and I've been there ever since. And it's an evolution, as I said. I have grown and I've gotten better. Yeah, was I leadership at some points? Probably. Yeah. And it's probably because of the people that were leading me and trying to, take their set of examples. But as I learned and read and had more life experiences and went back and evaluated my core values, I think I've developed, a certain type of skill in it's more leadership than it is leadership.
was going to say, did you get that the wrong way around? I can say for certain, even standing alongside you, Eric, I can guarantee you this. There'll be periods in my career I have 100% been leadershit, right? I think
Yeah.
the caveat I always ask people to remember is that I never meant to be like that. So, it was never like, right, let's go and be rubbish today, or let's go and be selfish today.
Yeah. Yeah.
None of us meant it. And of course, you can have the polar opposite to that too. Some people who will go out to do that. But I know you're probably like me. You didn't mean it, right?
Right.
You
Right.
are in this, as you said, this evolution.
It's interesting because, I mentioned the chapter authentic and fake, and every one of the chapters have contradictory
hmm,
titles or positions, right? And what I like how you approach that is it's not that one is right or wrong. There's one that maybe is stronger, and yes, you want to move towards it, but it doesn't mean the other point is not something that you'll never be or never be in. And when I think about authentic and fake, I think about, as you're going through that journey of learning and trying to be more authentic, there's going to be times where you have to be fake, right? Because you're not where you want to be yet. So you're kind of being fake. And it prompted a question that I wanted to ask you is, I feel that how I act in the work environment sometimes is different than I act personally at home with my family, with my kids. That's just, and my friends, it's just a different environment. And I think, oh, well, am I being authentic in one of those and fake in the other? And I came to the conclusion that, I'm really being authentic in both. It's just I have two different ways that I approach people depending on the environment. And I just wondered what you thought about that.
Well, I think the key word here is situational and context, right? So, two people sat together talking about somebody else idly, you would argue is gossip, right?
Yes, yes.
Change the context to talking about people in a business, talking hopefully objectively and having a similar style conversation. You're talking about leadership. And
Yeah,
so I think the context is the key player in that situation.
yeah.
In the same way, how many people have you worked with throughout your career where a manager makes one small error and it is they befriend the people they're leading?
Yeah.
And it's a matter of time, isn't it, before it goes wrong, right?
Yeah. Yes.
It's an inevitability, and you don't believe it when you're in it. You think it's not going to happen to you, and it does. So
Yeah.
it's all about the context and the situation. And when you're let's say you were a peer, you and I were peers, and then one of us gets promoted, the dynamics change. So that demands a change. It demands
Hmm.
evolution. And that's where we end up in this fakeness to begin with, only because it's new.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and actually, it's much easier to use a dramatic word, right? To almost backslide or fall backwards, right? To being a mate again, than it is to stay on the new path and develop skills as an option to help you cement the new space that you're in. It's
Yeah.
interesting. You prompted a thought in my head as well in your description about evolution, right? Your
Yeah.
own evolution. Evolution is the best form of change, right?
Yes.
If you think about all the best brands over the last 30 years who didn't make it, right? Or are distinctly different today, right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
think about it. I think you say it like this: Nokia, right? Or
Yeah.
Nokia, right?
Well,
Think about BlackBerry, brands like
I was
that.
just going to say, I just had a conversation the other day with a friend about BlackBerry. They didn't evolve. They thought they had the best product in the world, but society changed. It evolved, and they
Yeah,
didn't evolve with it. That's why they're no longer around.
it's really interesting because we were just together with our kids, and our kids are all old enough to have phones pretty much their whole life, right, in one shape or form. And one of our
Yes.
daughters said, "Oh, I remember that the click noise of the button on the BlackBerry." But even today, she said it super fondly, right? So they were on to something. People did feel like that about their
Yes.
product, but they didn't evolve over a long period of time, which meant the only choice was a revolution. And with a revolution, comes risk, right?
Yes. Yes.
So change not done in an evolution will become a revolution in the end. And you lose almost the choice on what impact and how things are going to fall, right? You lose the choice because you're not quite playing roulette with it, but you might be depending on your marketplace, product, or software. So
Yeah.
but leadership is something we should be evolving as we expand our skills and our self-awareness. Was there a particular thing in the chapter rewrite you liked or stood out to you?
There's probably two things that stood out to me. The first one is, and we've talked about this many times, you brought in listen like your life depends on it. And you said how that is being authentic, right?
Yeah.
And I've always loved that phrase of being, listen like your life depends on it, because it really is self-explanatory. You're sitting there, you're giving the other person an opportunity to speak, share their point of view, and you're listening intently. And that to me is as authentic as you can get.
Yep.
The,
I
the yeah,
I
go
like
ahead.
you highlighted that. I really like you highlight that. And it's a really simple, challenging thing to get right.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's simple, but sometimes difficult to implement because of the habits that we have. We have all this knowledge and experience that we just want to share with people. And, at times you just have to, close the lips and listen, open the ears and close the lips. That's what you need to do. The other thing that I really liked, and I've never heard this one from you before, was the walk acronym that you had, where you talk about the what is the W, what is your leadership style? Think about that. Look at yourself, look inside and think about what is it that you're trying to do? What are you trying to be as a leader? Ask, which the A for ask is ask others, what do they see? And I think that's really important, because I reflected back to a time when I had my firm and I had my leadership team around the table, and I would say things and they felt comfortable enough to give me feedback. And I thought I said one thing, they heard something totally different.
Yeah.
And so it's important to ask for that feedback. They just gave it to me. So, we had that kind of relationship, which I thought was pretty valuable. But if you don't have that, you have to ask for that. So I love that point. Learn, for the L, listen, learning is something I never want to stop doing, and no one should. So I think it's really important to learn. And, this book has so much information that you can learn. And then the next thing, knowledge. Now that you've learned and you've got all this knowledge, apply it. And that's where I find people often fail. They have all the knowledge, they've done the learning, but they forget the last thing, which is to apply that knowledge. Make sure that you use it, every day. So I love that acronym of walk.
It's a great highlight. And if you take the K in walk, it segues directly into what we're doing with Anne coaching at the moment, with the daily D-logs.
Yes.
And there is a acceptance that we all know there's things we should do every day, right? Whether it's exercising, drinking water first, or whatever they are, right? The list and the options are endless, right?
Yes.
Whereas I was listening to this week about the 7 areas of the world where people live the longest, right?
Yeah.
And what do they all do in common? Because there are similarities. So and you can find whatever list you like. But like anywhere you look, there's also that problem which comes along, which says, I noticed 10 things I should do. I did 1, or I did 3, or I did none, or I did 10, and it's that yo-yoing. And I think we want to help people get the most important things right. And it's very personal. It's up to you. But knowledge, if you're gaining knowledge and not using it, you may as well not have gained it at all.
I agree.
It's encouraging the listeners and the readers to say, what do I need to know? And we're at a time, Eric, where I think you'll agree there's so much knowledge available. So much.
Yes. Some
Good.
of it's true and some of it's not.
That's correct. Yeah.
It's also weeding through all that information and knowing what's useful and what's true. But I think, I've seen this from clients that I've worked with. It's always, well, I don't have the time. And my response to always the thing about time, there's always time. It's just how you use it
Yeah.
and using it effectively. And, I think, this book touches on a lot of that and how you can have the time to really focus on the things that matter.
And I agree with you. And I think time can be used, in all kinds of ways. I'm going to be ridiculous with you for a sec, right? I hope you don't object. So at the weekend, if I'm doing laundry, right, and I was talking to Helen, my PA, today about doing laundry, literally today. And I said, Helen, I have to let you know something. I do the laundry so I can just decompress. And she went, oh my goodness, so do I. Right. So it's a process, right? Where
Yeah,
I don't have to think much, and I can be in idle mode. But forget that process and what that does for me, up or down, whatever. It's more about if I know I'm going to ride indoors on a Saturday for 90 minutes, right?
yeah,
I cannot do it on its own. I have to use the time twice by putting laundry on, right? Because I can't cope with the thought. I can cope with the thought, but I think about all that time wasted. In the same way,
yeah,
so another example is when I go riding, I listen to books, right? And I listen
right.
to all kinds of things to combine things. So you're using the same amount of time doing more than one thing.
Yep,
Uh,
yep,
and, but in the office, where you're doing work that doesn't need, you know, you to listen to what's going on around you, have a book playing on double speed. You might not understand it, but your brain can hear it, right? Or,
interesting, interesting.
or indulge in a podcast that you like this one,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
just you'll zone in and out and pick something up when it connects with you. And so it's how do you use time in a duplicitous way intentionally, unless, like in the book, you have to give those moments of your total concentration. So,
sure, sure.
and we can find more time
Yeah,
uh, as a result. The I think that'll help people get from knowledge to action, is to realize there is, as you said, more time available. What
yeah.
what did you think? What did you think about this style change to the book? Because that's the other thing that changed quite a lot, didn't it? Is this knowledge go deeper or action? It that's quite a change. But I know you've seen it in the framework book too, right?
Yeah, yeah, but I like it. I like it a lot because, like you just said, it actually prompts people to do something,
Yeah,
right? It's so many times I've read management books, different on various subject matter, and I'll get through the first 3 or 4 chapters, and then it's like I can't do this anymore because it's just, talking blah 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 blah, and there's nothing that doesn't go in different directions. Whereas the book, I feel like it makes you think. It makes you say, how does this apply to me? Like at the end of each chapter where you have the act, what action are you going to take, or what are you going to change, what are you going to transform? Those that makes you start thinking. Whereas other books doesn't have that, it doesn't have that after each chapter. And then, I love at the end of the book where it just has some of the techniques that you can apply. So it's things that you can actually use every day. So that's why I like it. And, that's why I think it's a book you can go through from cover to cover because it keeps you intrigued. And
yeah,
I also like the very beginning of the book where you give very small little summaries so that, hey, if you want to spend 15 minutes on this book, you can do that. And
yeah.
if something captures your attention, then you could go deeper into it, right? In the rest of the book. I think that was brilliant.
Yeah, it's that you can tell that through not just what I did. My task was to rewrite it, and then once it was finished in the rewrite, where the goal was to make leadership really clear,
Yeah,
to make it stand out, to make it consistent, and to be more definitive about, well, what does that mean? And then once that process was done, kudos to Debbie and to Rachel to then creating what it then became next, both in the design, Debbie, and then editing, Rachel and Debbie. So huge,
sure.
huge kudos to them. And as always, on reflection, I think my part's the easy bit. But they were adamant that this series of books, including Fuel Your Mind, Fuel Your Life, You have to be able to do that pick up, put down, and then we want to delay the putting away. You eventually will. That's fine, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Let's delay it so you can interact with it as much as you can.
Right, right. It's almost like I've had different books that are more for reference purposes where
Yeah,
I can go to and get a quick answer to something. I see this as something you could keep on the side of your desk and refer to it
yeah,
because it's got that kind of flow to it where you don't have to read it cover to cover straight through, but you could use pieces of it every day.
100%. And a bit like some of my favorite books, Good to Great is in my desk drawer all the time.
Yeah.
You know, because there's no other way to say that you've got a bad hire, right?
Yeah,
Tim
yeah,
Collins, along with many things, that for me is one of the crystal clear messages. And even how it's written in that book, about how once you find yourself accommodating, finding new roles, changing things, etc.,
yeah.
you're just masking the fact that you've hired the wrong person.
Mm.
Uh, so, but there's no reason to re-say that. Um, and I think that's why I think some of these books, like this one, like his, are books you just have on your desk.
Yeah,
In the same way, this is the cover of the framework. Is having the framework book to hand to be able to remember uh, things that are in there too.
yeah.
And what questions has it left other than the ones you've asked already to still ask me? And uh, what else struck you if you have no questions?
Um, I don't know if I necessarily have a question. Um, you had a question in that chapter about authentic and fake, where you say, are we born with that trait of being authentic, or is it something that we learn over time? And I just feel, from my personal perspective, I would answer that I think it's a learned thing. I think I have certain inherent values that I was raised with that make me a little bit more authentic because I've gone through those personality type tests and things like that. And, I always end up being kind of that compassionate, caring type person. But I feel it's something that's learned. I don't know, you kind of addressed that a little bit in the chapter, but I felt that was a good question or a good ask is,
Yeah,
what do you
I,
think?
I always think about, cell structure based elite sports people, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So some people are born with an automatic sports reflex. Some may never discover that they had it, right? Because that also is true. But there's something about, I always remember watching the Wigan Warriors coach do a talk one morning at a business breakfast when they were hosting it down at their rugby club, and I was lucky enough to go. This guy said, um, we look for the fastest reflex of how fast someone can get up off the floor. And they had a name for it. They knew what speed it was by the millisecond, and they could measure it in your responses physically, right?
hmm
You're
yeah,
probably born with that,
yeah,
right? That's just something about who you are. Whereas I think, and you can have, natural, I think, charisma, natural chemistry building abilities. You can also be a highly intelligent, great looking person and have a great start, right? But the rest of it, you can learn it. You
yeah,
can it. And I think you're right, Eric. I think the question is fair in terms of in the book. I think all of us can learn authenticity from the inside because that's where it exists. It doesn't exist out here, right?
yeah, yeah,
No, no, looking for it out here is the wrong place. Authenticity is entirely an inside job,
yeah.
and
I
that's where
agree.
you find it, and that's why it then does become learned, and therefore the exception of born with it is minute. It's not even a micro. Micro is too big.
Yeah,
The rest of us, you and I maybe, or maybe me more so than you, are in this not manufacturing process, but we're in this learning process of learning that it's okay to be authentic. It's okay to be yourself. It's okay to do that work on the inside, and it's not what the world says about you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I love that. I love the fact you highlighted that too, because I think, and Debbie and I have talked at length in some of the build-up in this season about authenticity is fake to start with. If other people have seen other stuff in you before, so
Yeah.
and you've got to have your eyes wide open for that too. Great. Any other questions you want to put in front of me? I mean, you're giving me an easy pass today, so I totally appreciate it.
I did give you an easy pass. I don't know why, but I just like you, Dave. What can I say?
You're a top guy, and isn't it great fun to talk about leadership, Eric? It really
It
is.
is. It really is. And I love sharing it with others.
Yeah. Let's consider there maybe one last thought together.
Okay.
Do you think that in the next decade, leadership will be more challenging than ever?
Well, I'm sure you see the news here in the United States. Our leadership, I feel, is totally lost. It definitely is leadership, not leadership, because they're focused on all the wrong things other than what they're supposed to be focused on, which is what the people want and what the people
Yep.
need.
Yep.
And whether it's in government or whether it's in the business world, it's the same thing. You have to listen. You have to hear what people are saying to you to know what you should be leading, what you should be doing. And I see a huge, huge void right now, to be honest with you. I think it exists in some companies, some well-run companies.
Yeah.
You see those companies. You probably know who I'm thinking of just by saying that because they're successful. My son-in-law works for one of those companies, and I just see the way he works and how he thinks. They have good leadership. There's no question that it exists. It's just not in every place in our culture that we need it right now. And if anything in the world right now, we need really strong leadership because of what I'm seeing. And it's not just in our country, it's around the world, what's happening in the Middle East and other places, what's happening in Ukraine. There's a void of leadership that,
I
I think
agree.
could solve these problems.
It is. I agree, and I think that you can get lost in the gap it creates, where you sometimes can feel like, well, what can I do about this, right? Where you don't have any direct influence on the area of concern. But I think the answer to anyone listening is every time you make a good leadership choice in your business, in your career, or in your role, in your community, in your town, in your sports club, in your charity, in your church, whatever it is, right?
Yep.
And your family, in your home, you are contributing to the aggregate effect. And I'd like to just give you a ray of hope, not you personally, but anyone listening, that we were at the Day of Inspiration last year with Tammy and her crew over in East Dundee, Chicago. And we got to see a lady whose I can't remember her actual name, but she does the environmental work and works alongside all kinds of organizations. She's an energy rocket like myself. And she educated the whole room on how the ozone has been getting better because the customer changed the way gas-based products were made by not buying. And the huge companies had to change because the consumer did.
Yeah.
And we sometimes forget leadership is the same. That over time, we can all be the aggregate if we all do the right things when it matters, when people aren't looking, all of those type of stuff. And I think we can aggregate together over time in our businesses, in our roles, in any leadership or area of influence that we're part of to do it for the better. Because that still is, and let's quote Margaret Mead to finish, right? It only takes a small group of people to change the world because it is the only thing that ever did. And we have to keep believing that, regardless of what challenges we face ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that.
Well, Eric, thank you so much for coming back to talk to us.
It's been a pleasure. I miss Debbie. I wish she could have been here with us. But
Let's get something in the schedule where you can talk to the both of us in our normal working patterns, and you get to see her too. But definitely, at
yeah.
least say before I say goodbye on the podcast episode, let me just say a great thank you for being part of this. Catch up again on this season.
Yes, that sounds great. I appreciate the offer to be here.